Hi everyone! After a long break, CodeHacks is so happy to be back with new and improved Java lessons. Today's topic is the 3 types of loops. To recap our previous lessons, we did an introduction to Java, variables and operations, and also conditional statements. So make sure you check out those lessons before you take a look at this one, and if you have any questions, comment down below or message us on Instagram at code.hacks. Alright, so let's get into the lesson. Here's the homework from our previous lesson on if and else statements, so pause and check your work. What is a loop? A loop is a method to iterate over data. Iteration is the process of repetition. To iterate is to repeat something. We have 3 types of loops that we're going to learn about: the while loop, do while loop, and for loops. Each of these performs different types of repetition, and I'll talk about what that means later on. So why do we even use loops? Well, sometimes we have to perform a singular action over a multitude of numbers, strings, or other types of data. So let's say you want a program that prints out your name 100 times, or sends you a nice message every morning because you're a little lonely. Well, you wouldn't want to write one line of code for every single time that happens. And this is why we use loops. You can use a loop to repeat an action a specific number of times, or you can use it to iterate over the characters in a string or the elements of an array or other data types that we're going to learn about in our future lessons. The first type of loop is a for loop. For loops perform actions for a predetermined or fixed amount of time, and they contain a conditional. For example, this for loop that we have over here. So the syntax is as follows. We have the word for, and then a set of brackets and curly brackets, and we put the statement that we want to repeat over and over again between those curly brackets. So first we start with a variable. Here we have int I equals to 0, and we end it with a semicolon, and then we have our condition, which is I is less than 10, and then another semicolon. And then we're going to have our increment. An increment means we increase the value of I after every iteration of the loop. Thus, the loop will repeat a total of 9 times. You actually don't have to put an increment within the brackets after for. You could really put it anywhere in the curly brackets that define the scope of the loop. You also don't have to make the increment 1. It can be any number you want. You could even do other sorts of operations like multiplication or subtraction. But in this case, we're going to do addition, and it's going to add by 1 every single time. So make sure whenever you're going to change the operation that you're going to do the math for how many number of times your loop is actually going to repeat. Alright, so the reason why we typically start at 0 over here, and we have the condition I is less than n or any other number, and we don't have less than or equal to, is because of how these things called arrays in Java are 0 indexed. So this means that they're going to start counting from 0. So even though in many cases you loop over an array of size 5 and your condition is I is less than 5, we only go up to number 4, which is the last index in our array since it started counting from 0. And it's very common to use a for loop to go over each element in an array. So make sure for our future lessons when we're going to learn about arrays, you remember the fact that they start counting at 0 and they end before the last number that we're going to have over here. So make sure you remember that. And then we have while loops. So a while loop also performs a task numerous times. The main difference between a while loop and a for loop is that you generally use a while loop when you don't have a predetermined number of times that you want to iterate. So what this means is that you don't know how many times you're going to repeat that thing, unlike the for loop where we knew exactly how many times it was going to repeat, which was 9. So here we have our example over here. The syntax is like this. We have the word while and then a set of brackets, and inside the brackets we have our condition. Both for loops and while loops have some sort of condition. The only difference is that in a for loop, we knew how many times the iteration was going to complete, whereas with while loops, we know that we're going to repeat something and for some certain amount of times, but we don't know how many times that's going to be. So if this condition in the brackets is true, this loop will execute and it will keep repeating, and it checks it every time to see if it's true. and whenever it's true, it's going to keep repeating. And whenever it's false, it will stop repeating. And this means that we're going to have to be careful or having infinite loops. We really want to avoid having that. So in this case, we iterate over this x value that we have until it's going to be equal to 5. But in an example over here where it's while true, it's going to be true every single time. So it's going to keep looping forever and ever, and it's never going to stop. And we do not want that. So avoid having a condition that's going to be true every single time. You need to have a condition that will be false at some point in your program. All right, the next type of loop is a do-while loop. A do-while loop is similar to while loops, but it checks the condition after executing the statement. So it works like this. It executes the statement that you want to repeat, and then it checks your condition, and if it's true, it does it again, and whenever it's false, it ends the loop and it moves on to whatever you have over here. Alright, so the syntax is the word do, and then you open your curly brackets and you have the statement that you want to repeat. And then you have the same keyword that we had before, while, and then you open your brackets and you put your condition over here. All right, so we also need to have an incrementer over here. So we need to increase our value by 1 each time so that this condition won't remain at the value that it had before, and it won't repeat an infinite amount of times. So let's try it out. Alright, so now that we have Eclipse open, we're gonna make our main method. So that's public static void main string args for those of you who might have forgotten from our previous lessons. And then after that, we're gonna do a for loop and then a while loop, and we're gonna be finished with a do while loop. Alright, so what we're gonna do in this program is that we're gonna use the 3 different types of loops that we have in Java, and we're going to find the sum of the natural numbers up to 25. So this is going to be 1 plus 2 plus 3 all the way up to 25. So first we're going to make a variable that's going to store that sum for us. We started 0 because we haven't started adding the numbers together yet. And then we start our for loop with the word for and our brackets and our curly brackets. Inside of the brackets, we're going to start with the integer I. We're going to equate it to 1 instead of 0. The reason for that is that the natural numbers start from 1, so we're going to start from 1 as well. And then we have our condition, which is I is less than 26. The reason for that is that we want to stop at 25. We don't want to add 26. And we're going to increase I by 1 every single time. And then we have to add I to our sum whenever this loop is going to repeat so that we can add all those numbers together. So we can do this by writing sum equals sum plus I, or we can do the shortcut, which is sum plus equals I, and then we have our semicolons. And what this will do is that every time this loop runs, it changes the value of I by 1, and then it keeps adding it to our sum so that at the end we have the sum of all the natural numbers up to 25. Now for our while loop, it's going to be a little bit different. So we still do sum equals 0, but we will not have our variable set inside of our loop. So we're going to have to set it outside, which means it's going to be int j equals to 1, and then we start our while loop with the word while. We have our condition, which is j is less than 26. And we open our curly brackets to have the statement that we want to keep repeating, which is sum plus equals to j. And another thing we need to add that we didn't add inside of our for loop is this increment over here. So we added over here instead of having it inside of our loop. So that's j++. And what we're going to do after that is that we're going to make our do while loop. The do while loop is going to be super similar to the while loop. So we're going to do sum equals 0, and then we have int k equals to 1, and we started with writing while, opening our curly brackets, and then we write sum plus equals k, and after that we do k plus plus, we close it, and we don't forget to write while with our condition, which is k is less than 26, and then we close it with our semicolons, and I think I forgot a semicolon over here, so I'm going to add it right there. So what we're going to do is that we're going to output the message that we have each time, which is system.out.println the sum. And let's compare the result that we get from each of these loops that we made. Alright, so we also write it for our while loop, we write it for our do while loop as well. And once we have finished writing all of this, then we can output our results by running the program. And here in our console, we get the result 325 every single time for each of these loops. So here's the homework for today. Write a program with the 3 different loops that takes 3 numbers of input. The first 2 are integers of any sort, and the third number is a specified range. The program should output all the shared multiples of the 2 inputted numbers up to the specified range. Thank you for listening to our lesson today. Subscribe to be updated on our weekly lessons.